You are listening to the Billy Dees podcast.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked us out before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. With me today, we have an interview. Danielle M. Orsino is on the line. Danielle, so glad you are here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
All right. I am too. This is kind of different. I haven't had a cosplayer. That's kind of a new subject for me. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. So we'll get into that. But Danielle is a fantasy author and a martial artist and a cosplayer, as I mentioned. She was inspired to write her series by a patient who needed a distraction during IV therapy. She told him a story, and each day she added to the adventure, and he encouraged her to share the story, and her writing and series was born. She is a cosplayer and began dressing up as her characters. This decision led her former publisher to place her on the covers of her series. She is one of the only fiction fantasy authors to accomplish this, and she has been dubbed the new Fabio of fantasy. The only thing I would say about that reference is you have to be of a certain age to get it.
Good point.
How old is Fabio now? He probably looks worse than I do.
I don't know how old he is. He always kept that a secret.
Yes.
You got to find out. Get the Scooby Gang together.
She loves exploring the world of writing and exposing the underbelly of the publishing industry at the same time. All right, interesting. Where are you from, Danielle? And is like the arts and writing and all that stuff, has that always been in your blood?
Originally, I'm from Carmel, New York,
okay.
Little town, upstate New York. I really don't consider it upstate, but everybody else does, so I'll go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Writing, I don't know if it was always in my blood. Creativity has always been there. My grandfather was an artist, photographer, so always in the arts. My father builds motorcycles, so I guess, there's artsiness there. I did not think I would end up here. No. If somebody had gone back and told little Danielle, you're going to write some fantasy, I think she would just look at you and go, huh? Yeah. I'm not going to keep reading comic books for the rest of my life and dressing up as Wonder Woman. Well, that part's true. So no, I didn't think I'd end up here, but I'm very glad I am.
How did the martial arts factor into that?
Once again, I tend to fall into things and not plan. But long story short, I wanted to go to New Orleans with my best friend, Jen. And my dad was like, I'm not letting you. And he looked right at her and going, her. He lives in New Orleans at 18 years old. And I was reading a lot of Anne Rice. We both were, and we wanted to go on the tours. So he said, get your yellow belt in Taekwondo. He happened to know the instructor, Mr. McLaughlin, because they went to the same gym. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you get that and I'll let you go. And I walked right into that class. Mr. McLaughlin rented a room out of Gold's Gym in Danbury, Connecticut. And with my, low-slung sweatpants and my little crop top, walked in there chewing gum and stood at the head of the line. It was like, I'm here for karate. And, my career started there. I gave that man a lot of gray hair. And, but it was the best thing I ever did.
Why do you say that? Was it good for your mental and physical awareness, or what was, you say it's the best thing you ever did?
I never thought I would end up in martial arts. That was not on my bingo card, on my radar at all. But it tested me in ways, it made me stronger. It made me who I am today. Even in my writing and everything I do, martial arts plays a part in it. Once you become a true martial artist, you can't separate it. It bonds to you. It becomes your shadow. It is part of your blood, your essence. And so I think I was always meant to do it, but getting there was a different story. Somebody really had to push me. And Mr. McLaughlin, I owe him a lot. I did make his life very difficult. And he made mine difficult too, but he made me uncomfortable. And I think in order to really get change out of a person and take that leap, you have to become uncomfortable. And there was no other way it was going to happen unless I went through martial arts.
I would think that with all the posing and stuff you've done, I saw some of your pictures online, that it's very much like ballet almost, because it really enables you to pose and do all those things for photography and the cosplaying. Am I right about that?
Yes, martial arts has definitely played into it. I took ballet as a child. I was never going to be good at it. I mean, I'm 5'1". I'll tell you 5'2" on a really good day.
Yeah.
But, we ain't tall here. So I was never going to be a prima ballerina. Let's just start with that. But martial arts has played into the posing and everything, and really the embodiment, because when you do forms or katas, as people may know, you really have to take in that warrior spirit and convince people that you are fighting these imaginary, opponents and things like that. So I would say martial art plays into all of it, but it does help with the posing, the flexibility, all of that.
Interesting. Okay, the writing itself. Obviously, you were inspired by events that happened to you through the situation happening, with the patient. Mm-hmm. And you talk about the process of writing from an untrained author. I'm not sure there is a trained author. I mean, I suppose there's people that take literature and creative writing and English classes and things like that. That would certainly, I would think, help you. But storytelling, I don't know. You tell me, is the approach different when you haven't been trained, let's say classically as an author?
It's very odd, because when I speak to other authors who have a master's in creative writing or that kind of literature thing, they have definitive things they've been taught, tools they've been taught, plotting, outlines, things like that. Yes, they have a very specific method. Myself, it's fly by the seat of my pants and chaos. I had no idea. I mean, I wrote all 6 books in volume 1 in the Legacies of Light and Dark in one shot, because I didn't know what I was doing. I just started picking up, and I hand wrote everything. I picked up one journal, started writing, then I'd be like, oh, well, they're going to want to know why this happened. And I'd pick up another. Nothing was done in order. I didn't know the term world building. Everything was instinctual, which I think is a good thing for me, because like I said, I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to that. But it is very untrained. Look, I love a good comma. I'll throw a comma in anywhere. So I'm not sitting there being like, here is the preposition. It goes here, the conjunction. None of that happened. Okay. Yeah. There was no form. It was just write, get something on the paper. We'll go from there and see what happens. To where when I spoke to other authors, they were like, I sat and I interpreted this 15th century poem. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm sorry, what? What did you do? Or somebody asked me about the Oxford comma. And I literally went home and looked at my keyboard. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's an alt comma thing. Do I have to hit shift? And I was just staring at it like, okay, how do I know? And I had to look it up. And then when I was like, it's a comma before and, I was like, keyboard, you betrayed me. There were things I just didn't know. So I think it's more that aspect of it, that there's a lot of nuances that I've just missed. I remember nature versus nurture, like man versus nature, those little things from English.
Sure.
Past that, we'll see what happens.
I've always been told over the years that, especially on your first draft, the most important thing is to get the story. You can go back on your second and do all the fine form things. But once you have a good story and you have it in your mind, it's like if you're a musician and you have a good melody or you have a good guitar riff, you want to capitalize on that first and then go back and worry about all the little details. Is that about right? Is that about right? Yeah.
I would agree with that. I often say it's like making a human body. I have to get the skeleton first.
Yeah.
Then I can do the bones. I can do the bones and I can do the meat and kind of do that. I'm probably more like the Swedish chef when I write. I'm just pouring it all in and then I'll kind of fine tune it and work it out. But when I write, it's almost like a download of information and I act out all the scenes in my head. I can hear the genuflection. I can hear all of that. And sometimes I'll say it out loud a couple times to see if that's exactly how I want it interpreted. and
Okay.
go back and forth. And my husband laughs at me because he'll hear me and he'll go, "Is that what you were saying in there?"
Wow.
And I'm like, "Yeah, it's that scene. I'm doing that." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Now I got what's happening." And I've pulled out dragon figurines and fought with them like G.I. Joe toys. And he'll walk in the room and go, "Never mind. I don't want to know what's happening here. I just let me know if you need help and back out." So I think everybody has their process and what works for them.
Sure.
And it kind of balances out.
I have a friend that's, she writes a column. I'm not sure how many papers she's in. And she tells me that, I asked her about how to get over writer's block one time. And she says, well, when you have deadlines, writer's block is a convenience that amateurs can have. You got to plow through it. Now, it's not different. It's probably a little different when you don't have a deadline. But, is the discipline you write whether you feel like it or not?
I try to always write something and get it out because I can't edit what's not on the page. If there's at least something there, I can work and go through it. What I try not to do is force myself to write in order.
Mm-hmm.
If I try to do that, there's going to be a problem. So it's just a matter of putting something on the page. If I can do that, and even if it's like, there's only 4 sentences out of me right now, usually if I get the 4 sentences, something else comes. And then I can keep going. I'm writing something right now, which is completely different than things I've done in the past. And if I hit a spot where I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure, if I turn to research, it always comes back around. But if you pause too long, I always find that's what stops you.
Yeah.
Just get something there. You can always go back. I always tell people, change the font. If, and this way, you can, okay, that was a spot for me. Use brackets, different things, use highlighting. And you can always find where it was that one little area that I got to kind of go back and fix that. But just keep writing. I prefer handwriting myself because I like the tactile, feel. And that to me is really helpful. If I'm walking on the treadmill, I will pick up my memo on my phone and talk it through so I don't lose it. Because sometimes when you're just mindlessly doing something, I find the ideas start to flow. And I am a 2 a.m., 3 a.m. girl where something wakes me up and I've got to have that journal right next to me and say, okay, there's an idea, and get it down so I can come back to it in the morning. Yeah.
I have found, I used to do stand-up comedy and I was around a lot of writers. And I would have to say stand-up is probably what I'm about to say is most true for stand-up, in that it's, there's no age, like being a pop star, being a singer, anything. You got to start young. There's just absolutely no question about it. Comedy, you can start anytime. You don't have to be attractive. As a matter of fact, it's probably better off that you're not. I don't know too many comedians that look like Brad Pitt. So it's probably the one area of show business that you don't have to be young and beautiful to start. Writing is probably one of those things. I've always been told you have to be over the age of 30 to write something really good. It's very hard for somebody. It's one thing to be extremely intelligent. It's another thing to have the perspective of time, which unfortunately you got to get older and you got to have those skills. I would say that a lot of writers are unexperienced. They're maybe in a midlife crisis. They're empty nesters, and I've always wanted to write. So, they're right in that spot, middle age, where they have the perspective of time. They have some life experiences. So they're in a good spot. You already gave some of the good things. What are some of the things, if you're in that situation, what are the things you want to avoid? What are some of the mistakes maybe that you made that you wish you wouldn't have?
Oh my gosh, I've made so many. The biggest thing is being too trusting of other people and their opinions. When it comes to writing, it is a personal thing. You have to know the difference between confidence and delusion in one sense, but you cannot trust the world, because what you are doing, 98% of the world would love to do. Only a very small percentage of us actually finish the book. And so there's a bunch of people out there who are experts, and that includes your friends, your family, everybody.
Yeah.
Don't give it to them. Just don't. Also, the experts out there know the industry, know the difference between a developmental editor, a copy editor, a line editor. Make sure whatever genre you're in, the editor understands the genre. Do not give a book that has no romance to a romance editor. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work. There are things like that you have to know before going in. I've made those mistakes. I've made a lot of those mistakes. The other thing is, you can be too trusting, and you have to know what to fight for and what not to fight for. There are hills to die on and hills not to. Mm-hmm. You know your characters better than anybody. But if an editor keeps going, you know what, right here, this needs to get fixed. You can't sit there and say, no. You have to know when to go, okay, all right, maybe I should look at this again. But then you can't take all of their advice either. Mm-hmm. I've made both those mistakes. An example was, I was approached by one of the big 5 publishers for Locked Out of Heaven. And one of their things was, you got to change your name. It should be DM Orsino, not Danielle. And I dug my heels in. Everybody's going to know I'm a woman and blah, blah, blah. Here we are 6 years later. Mm-hmm. And I get so many emails from men saying, I wish I didn't know you were a woman. I'm sorry, that's horrible to say. They were like, but I didn't pick this book up for so long because you're you. And now here I am later, and I'm like, I missed out on a great series for so long. I think if you had gone by your initials, you would be so much further. And I'm like, they were right. Like, I really should have just not been so stubborn about that, and should have just taken their advice and gone, okay, I could have gone by DM. Like, that's something that wouldn't have killed me. But at the time I was so like, I'm a girl. Yeah. I could have let the girl power thing go for a second. So there's little things like that I think you have to do your research on. Yeah.
Marketing is a whole nother subject. I mean, there's a whole lot of weird little things that the public does that you have to be aware of. Some of them you may not understand, you may not agree with, but especially when you're starting out to get your stuff out there, you got to sometimes dance around those little things. And that kind of brings us to, you mentioned being a female in the fantasy world. I don't know that I've ever connected those two dots. There's a lot of things I can, come up with that I would say, being in a male dominated thing is kind of tough. I don't know that I've connected that with fantasy, but you just mentioned something about how people choose authors. What are some of the challenges as a female, especially in the fantasy world? Is it always like male heroes, Marvel Comics type stuff, or what is the issue with gender?
The biggest thing is that right now, a lot of people think female, fae, fantasy. You must be writing romance. You must be writing smut. You must be writing like Sarah J. Maas. I am none of those. I am old school Brandon Sanderson, J.R. Tolkien, things like that. And so when people pick up my book and they see a female author and fantasy and fae, they're expecting romance. I see. I don't give you any of that in the first couple books. So they're like, so my female audiences, a lot of them are let down. My male audience, who some of the books are a little more geared to and would like that front contextual load, that old school Brandon Sanderson, like I said, they miss me. And then their wives wind up handing them the book going, you would like this, is up your alley. They read it and then they could write me back and go, oh my gosh, you have dragons and they talk and they're not just fire breathing. They're their own sentient beings. Oh, this is exactly what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And my wife gave it to me. And I'm like, they kind of, and then I get the women who were like, she info dumps. And then somebody goes, no, it's not info dumping. It's a front contextual load. By the time you get to book 3, all that stuff that she talked about comes right back around. Mm-hmm. And so there is a bit of a disconnect. I do have my female fans my readers are very loyal and they're voracious and I love them. But I do have a big divide in it. Mm-hmm. And some of it is just due to gender in it. Also, my men are not typical. My dark fae king is a virgin. He is not throwing a woman over his shoulder and giving you that typical thing. He's brooding, but he'll slay a demon and then he'll go home and kind of sit there with his dragon and be like, did I do the right thing today?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure. And so they're very complex, layered characters that do not fit in to the typical stereotypes of things. And I don't want them to. Okay. I really don't. My women are not fighting over men. They do not have time to swipe right or left. They've got a war to plan. And so people are like, there's no romance. I'm like, no, books 1, 2, there's nothing. By 3, you're starting to get an enemies to lovers. Mm-hmm. And then, but it's always the underling. It's not what's driving my plot. So for a female fantasy author, some of them are like, there's no spice. There's no, they're like, what's going on here? And I'm like, no, you got to think also, my books are not 500 pages. Mm-hmm. They're between 3 and 225. I'm your gateway drug into fantasy. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to spend a lot of money because I have to think about how much money are you going to spend? I don't want you spending past $25 mm-hmm. because I want to give you a great experience, but you should not have to pay $50. I can't do that myself.
Yeah.
I'm not paying that much.
Sure.
I'm not doing it. So I like to be able to give you an immersive experience with playlists and illustrations and other things. So I have to take my reader into account very deeply. And that puts a different spin on a lot of it. So if I'm going to do a love story, it's going to take me a long time.
I see. Yeah, fair enough. We talked about cosplaying and mm-hmm. just for the audience that may not know the term, what is cosplaying?
Cosplaying is your expression of fandom. It's how you interpret the character, you dress up like them, how you feel they would act. I've seen people take Wonder Woman and do her in a Victorian style. I've seen people take the character of Captain America and make it a female Captain America. It's just how you take your fandom, whatever it is, mm-hmm. dress it up and bring it to life.
If, let's say I'm, Star Wars and all that, people dress up, that's all cosplaying.
That's all cosplaying.
Yes,
cosplaying. That's all. That's just, it's not live action role playing. That's different. It's when people go out and act out on the battlefield and things like that. Cosplaying is dressing up however you do it. Some people buy their costumes. Some people make their costumes. It's just going and embodying your fandom for the day.
Okay. So you can do this like just, at yourself at home, or did you, mm-hmm. or do you go to like about these Star Trek conventions and all that?
People go to cons. Some people just do photo shoots. They never go to cons. They just do photo shoots, post them online. It's just for you. It's not really for everybody else. The community sometimes gets a bad rap. Hey, it's a bunch of geeks running around in spandex.
Yeah.
But it's an art form to a lot of people because they take it to all different levels. I have friends who, build like you wouldn't believe. I have some friends who just take one character and they are that character in every way, shape, or form. They try to live their life like that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's beautiful. It's just how you do it.
When you do it, you evidently did it in terms of the characters that were in your books. Am I correct in interpreting that?
Before that, I was always cosplaying at New York Comic Con as different characters. And then I took it a step further and did a photo shoot as my characters to figure out what they would wear and really get into it as I wrote, because I thought it would help me in my writing.
That's
I felt my characters were flat. Okay. And I needed to go to another level. So I pulled on my cosplay experience and brought them to life that way.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting way to understand your characters. That's cool. All right. Because I honestly, for example, when you talk about it as something that was an individual form of expression, when I heard cosplay, I kind of knew what it was. But I always thought about the conventions and, the Star Wars people and people mm-hmm. walking around like whatever that was, Chewbacca and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Comic books.
Mm-hmm.
I associate cosplaying with comic books. Is that fair?
That's a fair statement. Yes. Yep. 100%. That's where a lot of it comes from. New York Comic Con, San Diego. That's where you see most of us. And we are dressed up like Captain America, Superman, Wonder Woman, whatever you expect, Catwoman. Okay. That's where you'll see us.
So, did comic book reading or in writing, and in your case, I don't know if you've ever wrote one, has it influenced your style of writing? I would think I wasn't a big comic book person when I was young, but I mean, I know what they are. And I would think the story blocking would be something that very much translates into writing. I don't know if that's true or not.
Comic books were what I loved. I mean, as a kid, Wonder Woman pulled me right in, and that was it. Linda Carter came on, and I was done. I was pulled right in, and from that point on, comics were my focus. It has influenced my writing, definitely. Chris Claremont's The Dark Phoenix saga. I all of a sudden learned, that was my morally gray lesson. I cared about the villain. Not everything was black and white. X-Men, all of that. That was it. The artwork, I discovered Mike Deodato Jr. and his run with Wonder Woman, Jim Steranko, and everything he's done to just change comic books. His writing, he doesn't get enough credit as a writer. Stephanie Williams, her run on Nubia. All of these people influenced me in some way and still do to this day. They have influenced my writing style in the sense that my books are shorter. And I do like to end one chapter and wrap it up and give you a cliffhanger on the next. It's kind of that same Batman, same bat time, same bat channel. I end one thing and give you something else. That has definitely influenced it. I am currently working on a graphic novel for Locked Out of Heaven right now. Mike Lilly is drawing it. So I am doing it because I always thought I'd be in the industry, and I'm kind of excited to take my own work and turn it that way. But comic books, especially when you're ADHD, dyslexic, that comic books are a lifesaver.
Yeah. Interesting.
They just are. So they're in my blood as well. And for martial artists, when you're a kid, you want to be a superhero. Yeah. So you kind of go into martial arts thinking, this is as close as I'm going to get. And you just go that way. And X-Men, it's all about outcasts. As a teenager, of course, Peter Parker, everything.
Yeah.
They get you.
What I would ask you next is probably a little bit of a curveball, but getting into the business of show business and movies and all that. I think there's a good argument to be made that the superhero has been well covered in movies of the last 5 or 10 years. And a lot of times they're different versions of the same storyline. And they've come to depend on special effects so much that they look more like video games than they do movies. And unfortunately, Hollywood is, going through a transitional time for sure. There's a whole bunch of reasons why. Streaming, I think they invested too much in streaming, the popularity of things like TikTok. All those things, you mentioned staying away from politics. That's something that actors these days cannot do. And, in the old days, in the Samuel Goldwyn days, he didn't allow that to happen. He didn't have Humphrey Bogart and all this stuff.
Yes.
BSing about the president. It just didn't happen because he knew that it would alienate the audience. So with that being said, it's getting to the point now where the only movies that make money are the superhero ones. I mean, with a few exceptions here and there, and they're starting to look the same. Do you think so often they get on something that works and then they just beat it into the ground? How do you feel about the state of how comic book stories and fantasy and superheroes over the last 5 or 10 years, how has that evolved in what people watch in terms of movies and things like that? Is it good or bad?
I think it's down the middle.
Okay.
I don't love some of it. And I'm a comic book fan.
Yeah.
I mean, when Wonder Woman came out, believe me, I was in full Wonder Woman gear online, ready to go. It was the first one. The second one did not happen. I was there. I mean, I loved it. I adored it. The fact that we didn't get a third and she was cut right after the second one bothered me because we've seen bad Batmans and they've always come back. Yeah. Like Batman always gets a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance. Yeah. The same thing with Superman. I think what Zack Snyder did with Superman, I loved it. I liked seeing a darker take. What I don't like is the minute you veer from the middle, Hollywood's like, nope, didn't work. We got to go.
Yeah.
And they don't give it that other chance. That's the problem. I find that we wash it too much. And they make the movies partially for the fan crowd, and then they have to make it for everybody. It's a really weird line to walk. It just is. You can't make everybody happy. I get it. But the minute a director tries to do something different, they're demolished and we never see it through. I said, I enjoyed Zack Snyder's take. I loved Henry Cavill's take on Superman. I wanted to see him follow through. But all of a sudden we got James Gunn doing punk rock is the new kindness. Hey, let's go. And I'm like, who the heck is Superboy? I'm like, since when is Superboy 2 years old, Superman? I'm like, I want a man. Not that the kid didn't do a great job. And Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, finally. I mean, that was a great Lex Luthor. But I feel like the minute this thing doesn't even make enough, they cancel it. We're on to something else. I think the attention span is very short and nobody's willing to take any more chances. The Avengers Doomsday coming up, while I'm excited for a lot of parts of it, to me, some of it feels like a cash grab. Like Marvel messed up in so many places that now it's like, okay, let's bring this back in. Let's give this cameo. Okay, James Marsden's back as Cyclops. I'm looking at it going, all right, well, this is either going to be really great or we're screwing it all up. To me, I kind of want to go back. I don't need to see Lord of the Rings again.
Yeah.
But I'm done with the remakes.
Yes.
I want to see some new, fresh things. Do I need to see 13 Ghosts brought back again? I love Matthew Lillard, but do I need to see another remake? Do I need to see Scream again? No, there are so many writers out there with fresh ideas that I'm kind of looking at Hollywood going, okay, you got streaming. Do I think streaming was a great idea? We blew that. Like Hollywood, there's no middle. It's like one end of the pendulum to the other. We can't seem to, a good idea gets blown up quick. There's so many good ideas and you have so many different ways to do it. Take a new writer. Take some of this IP. I don't need to see Fourth Wing done. Okay. Like it doesn't always have to be that New York Times bestseller. There are these indie authors that have great IPs that I think Hollywood could do something with. Netflix, whatever you want to call it. Because now I feel like you can't say Hollywood. You got to say Netflix, you know, like that's where we're at now.
Yep.
And do something. I think animation is really where we can go with it. It doesn't always have to be live action. I think animation is still there. It's not always Disney. It's not always Pixar. There are, Powerhouse. There's a lot of animation studios that could do great things and we could pull from it. It doesn't have to be a video game, but I think we're missing the boat on some smaller IPs that are still trendy, but they don't have a studio behind them or they don't have somebody behind them that if these places would stop and look at the indie authors that are on Instagram or on TikTok, they would find there's IPs out there that are just gold mines waiting to happen. We don't always have to go back to Batman. I know Martha died. Okay. I know what happened at the end of Zorro. They walked out. Okay. They got shot. We saw the pearls go. I don't need the origin story again and again for Peter Parker. Love him. Well, what am I going to do? I mean, when you think about it, Wonder Woman got 2 shots. That's it. That's all we've seen of her. Catwoman got 1.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, Halle, sorry. It was a nice shot. But, Elektra 1. The females do not get the same chances the men get.
Interesting.
It doesn't matter how great their characters are. They don't get the same grace. So I think Hollywood needs to start looking outside of the same stuff. We've seen the Dark Phoenix saga done twice. They haven't gotten it right. Don't give me a third. You're not nailing it, guys. Let's move on.
Okay. You mentioned animation. And I'll tell you, the first thing that goes off in my mind in this day and age is, you know what? It's going to be AI. And I think that you talk about cosplaying, interpreting characters and all that. I have a feeling that the actors being involved in interpretations of characters and things like that, as much as they want to fight it. I think studio execs now don't have to put up with a bunch of stuck up actors. The day is going to come when they can make a Wonder Woman or whatever exactly the way they want. It has the potential for being something really good. I mean, I think that you could, wind AI into creativity, but I have a feeling that it's going to be more of a business decision that takes precedence first. What do you think? I know it's hard to predict, but since you're passionate about this and it impacts what's something that you feel, very strongly about, you have a talent for, what is your opinion about what's happening with AI right now? I presume you saw the fight between Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. And it didn't happen. I mean, it was very hard to tell.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing with AI, and I'm going to probably upset a lot of people out there. So let me preface it with that. AI is a force for good and a force for evil. It's all who wields it and the guardrails we put on it. I will never write a book with AI. Okay. Do I use pro writing aid to help out? 100%. But I don't sit there and go through every sentence and say, give me more sensory, give me more. No, but I check my grammar because I'm horrible with it. But, that being said, that's what I use. Is it AI? Some people will argue I'm using AI. Do I create book covers with AI? No. Now, I have myasthenia gravis and I have inclusion body myositis. Both cause issues with my hands and my eyes. I'm also an artist. I have gotten to the point that when I draw, things aren't looking as nice as they used to. Oh. Have I run it through AI and it's my own art and said, you got to fix that eye, because I have now worked on that eye for 6 hours and I can't get it right. Yes, it's trained on my work, no one else's. And people have yelled at me and been like, that's not fair. You're using AI, the environment. When I see people with Parkinson's and with other diseases that were artists and are losing their ability to enjoy their art and are using AI on their own artwork, I don't have a problem with it. I really don't, because I know what it's like to not be able to do what you love and express yourself. That being said, do I think putting in a prompt that says, give me a Monet, and popping it in your book and saying, there's my character art for today? No. I want to be very clear. Wrong. So there is a fine line with AI. I know the courts have come down and said AI does not own anything that it does. I myself have been affected by Anthropic. Anthropic stole all my books and, ran around with them. So in all, AI can be good. It can be evil. Depends on who's wielding it. And right now there are no guardrails for it. It does hurt artists. I have friends who have been hurt by it. And I think, when you've got somebody who, runs around and says, this is my artwork, and it's not, that's a problem. But like I said, I've seen it help artists who are in physical decline. And this is still allowing them to have a piece of themselves. I can't look at it and go, oh, that's horrible. I look at it and go, as a nurse, I'm like, I get it. Get what you're doing. And if that's bringing you a little bit of joy still, I am not going to sit here and say, shame on you. Bad, bad, bad. So I think it's a little bit in the middle. What I don't like is I don't like the studios using actors without their permission, like Scarlett Johansson had the issue with her voice. You gotta get permission. If you're not getting permission, that's a problem. Grok, all that other stuff. Like I said, good and evil. It's just going to come down to how we use it.
Well, the issue, and we'll kind of round out with this, and as somewhat of a technical person, the problem with AI is like what you're talking about when somebody uses so and so's voice, very clear. Okay, it was taken. The problem with AI is that it goes into a pool. The information goes into a pool. It goes into a reservoir and gets mixed with other things. Like, for example, If I'm editing and I come up with a cool transition, I take 2 clips, I double them, I put them on top of each other, and I work out a transition that gives a mystical fade into another scene. That's something that I made. Now, a lot of software now is monitoring what you're doing so that they can optimize the software for how you like to use it. But in the meantime, how I did that went into a pool. Okay. And with other creators who came up with their own ways of creating transitions or creating effects or whatever. And they get mixed all up. And now AI is learning how to do those things. And you can't point your finger at something and say, I did that, because it's a conglomeration of other things that people have done. And that, to me, is the danger. I think, here again, if you try to sound like Michael Jackson, okay, clearly the voice was stolen, but most of the things aren't that cut and dry.
Right. There's a big gray area. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And that's where I think it's hard with AI, is there's this specific gray area that is not black and white. When we watch the Brad Pitt Tom Cruise fight, wait a minute, did Tom Cruise really say that's okay? Did Brad Pitt say it's okay? That's the area that we're like, ooh, wrong. But what you're describing, it's that area of, nobody can take ownership, and
yes.
AI is just going about its business. So I completely 100% agree with you. And like I said, as somebody involved in Anthropic, it learned off all my books.
Yeah.
It's already got the information. I can sit here and stomp my foot and huff and puff.
Yeah.
It already has it. Okay, you can give me a little settlement and that's fine, but it doesn't solve the problem. Mm-hmm. So I do understand what you're saying, and that's why I say it's so much more complicated than just right or wrong.
Yes, absolutely. Time will tell. It's going to be interesting. We've been speaking to Danielle M. Orsino. A lot of interesting stuff: cosplayer, martial arts, writer, all kinds of good stuff. Where can people find out more about you online?
Best place to find me is Instagram at DM Orsino Author. You can always go to my website, dmorsino.com, and just check me out. I'm all over the place. Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble's Legacies of Light and Dark series.
All right. What's the latest thing you're working on? Is something big coming out, or what do you got going on?
A Fool's Journey, Volume 2 of the Legacies of Light and Dark series just dropped. And Book 2 of Scars and Kisses will be coming out in September.
Awesome. Danielle, great talking to you. Thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Sure. My name is Billy Dees. You can find me on the platform formerly at one time known as Twitter, but it is now X. And that's kind of like my social media home, only because podcasting and the trending topics and the real timeness of X works out very well. But I'm on most of social media. You can find me real easy to find. Billy Dees Podcast. I am on all major podcast platforms. We have over a 10-year history, and you can find us on all of them. Thank you so much for listening to the program, and we will talk to you again very, very soon. I'm Billy Dees, and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find The Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter at Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.